Hello everyone. Welcome to the 7th programme in my series, Bob's Golden Memories. And this one, well, all of them go back a long way, but this is about as far back as I'm going to take you. This was when I first got picked to fish for England, 1984. The venue was the River Thiel in a small town called Yverdon in Switzerland. So leading up to this process, of course, just the year before, I'd been picked by the former England manager. This was before Richard Clegg was made manager. In 1983, I was picked by Stan Smith. He was the earlier manager, to fish. I thought, oh, lovely, Stan's picked me to fish for England, lovely. And it was a home international in Scotland, and I did really well. I won my section on the Waggler, 20 odd pound a roach. I fished ever so well. I came back from that venue in Scotland. It was a lock somewhere, I don't know. I came back from there, I was quite happy. And then, only to hear just 2 or 3 months later that the NFA, now the NFA was the National Federation of Anglers. That was the federation that organised all the England competitions. They were in charge of a lot of competitions, competition rules. This is prior to it's now the England Trust. They amalgamated with them. And so Stan Smith had been manager for quite a while, and they picked a new manager, Richard Clegg. And he's a Barnsley man. I didn't really know him that well, but I thought, well, you know, up till then anyway, nearly all the anglers that were picked were from the north. I was a southerner. I've said this before, northern anglers I think are better. Well, in those days they were probably more natural, and they probably still are. You know, perhaps it's come from their parents, perhaps a different sort of upbringing, I don't know. But anyone from the north were the ones that usually got in the team. And so Richard Clegg was named manager, so I thought, well, that's it. You know, I'd sort of, well, did I have hopes of getting in the team? Not really, no. I mean, I was happy when Stan Smith picked me, but didn't think for 1 minute that I would really be part of an England team. And I was fishing in Ireland. It was the competitions in May in '84, and we didn't have mobiles in those days. But I don't know how. But Richard Clegg somehow contacted me. I bet Kevin had told him where I was, or somebody had told him. And I couldn't believe it. He asked me, would I like to become a member of the squad that year to fish in Switzerland? You know, I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I thought, I can't tell you how I felt. Fabulous feeling to be selected. Not in the team, he said, as part of the squad. And I thought, well, I'm a new boy, so I wouldn't get in the team anyway. And of course, I said yes, straight away. Yes. Richard would love, and so I didn't really know Dick. He was from Barnsley, and most anglers that got in the team, and even then were mainly from the north of England, and rightly so. They were all very, very good anglers. But immediately I knew Ian Heaps quite well then. I'd fished with him a lot in Ireland, and I told him, oh, I've been picked for the team, Ian. And he said, well, do you fancy going across and having a look at the river, because Switzerland is not a long drive really. So I said, yeah, I would love to. So together, the two of us, we packed my car up. We drove across to Holland first to pick up some bloodworm and joker. Had a load of maggots with us. I remember the early days of taking maggots, the early festivals in Ireland. We used to travel on a ferry. This is a little aside story, but we used to travel on a ferry from Belfast, from Liverpool to Belfast, overnight it was. And it was always down in the bilges, 4 in a cabin, red hot it was, and the car decks were the same, they were red hot. And in those days, we just used to put our maggots in a big, one of these large, you know, these large maggot things that you steal off the bait breeders, really. These, I think they're about 6 gallon. They hold 3 gallon, but they're massive bait tubs. And we used to just put 3 gallon of maggots in there and stick them probably on the roof of our car, or stick them under the car when we got to the, and they, of course they were red hot. Loads of times I remember coming down to the car deck to get our cars in the morning. Mine didn't used to take that many, but other people with too many maggots, they got hot, sweated, and they were crawling up the walls of the car deck, covered it was. I don't know what people thought. But because we were going over on a big festival, Benson and Hedges, and there was lots of people anglers travelling on that same boat. But now, the best way, if you want to transport maggots now, the best way, make sure you chill your maggots down. They want to be fresh if you want to use fresh maggots, really. Fresh maggots don't keep as well, but if you really look after them, they're perfect. So you chill them right down. I get them from the bait farm, get them to chill them right down. Fairly clean, a little bit of sawdust in them, not too much. No maize in them, for sawdust is always better for travelling with maggots. And then put them in a bin liner. You can put 3 gallon in a bin liner. Do the top up, seal it, and then put them, usually in one of those big polystyrene boxes, you can get 2 3 gallon bags of maggots. And then if you fill a 2 litre water bottle up, fill it up with water, freeze it, so you've got 2 litres of water frozen, get a couple of those, put them in there, and then just seal the lid. And they'll keep like that for 30 hours, easy, because they'll keep cold. And then when you open them up, you think, oh, they're dead. They're all just laying there like dead maggots do. This is prior, we didn't know much about it, but that's how to transport maggots. Just put them in a big polythene bag, seal it up, and then a couple of big bottles of frozen water, and they keep perfectly. In fact, if I'm in Ireland, if I get a good batch of hooker maggots, so I buy a gallon of nut and they look beautiful, then what I'll do is I'll seal them up every night. I'll open them up, let them come round, and then I'll reseal them, take out what I want for the day, if they're just hookers. And then when I get back at night, I'll unseal them, let them come round. As soon as they come round, seal them up. And then at the end of the week, they're still as fresh as the start of the week. Brilliant way to keep them. Oh, blimey. I've already been talking for too long and I've got nowhere. Anyway, Ian and myself went to this river. So it was quite surprised when we saw it. A fairly, very narrow river, about 11 metres wide, flowing down from the mountain. So it was a distinct drop that you could see in the river from the top of the river where we started to fish all the way down the river the sections ran. It was quite a distinct drop, shallow at the top end. It got deeper and slower moving as you went down over not a long distance. Well, there's probably, I think 20 odd teams again in those days, 84, probably 24 teams of 5 anglers to fish 125 pegs. And we practiced different places. And when you're practicing, it's always better when you're practicing. And in fact, this is why Richard picked me. He'd been out to look at it prior to Ian and myself going. And there was loads of fish when he was there, dace, catching them pole to hand. And I'd built up this sort of reputation fishing in Ireland of pole to hand fishing because poles were just coming in. So I was as good on the pole as any of the other anglers, as any of the northern anglers, because it was new to all of us. I was on equal basis with them, and that's probably why he picked me. And I'd won some festivals already and had built up this reputation of being able to catch fish in the hand. So I really, I didn't con my way into the team, but I got into the team under false pretences because Richard thought it was going to be a pole to hand job, but it wasn't. When we got there, it was quite tough. Even if there was just Ian and myself were fishing, it wasn't good. When the river stood still, you could catch some perch. When it ran a bit, you could catch these dace, odd chub as well. It wasn't a bad venue, but don't forget there was only 2 of us. When there's only 2 of you fishing, it makes a big difference. You can draw fish from a long way, and usually you catch many more. A lot of you will know this when you practice on your own. It's good, isn't it? And then when match day comes, it's a bit different. So we came back quite happy, caught some fish, and then we went out on official practice. We drove out there Now this is, then it gets a bit tougher, and I'll give you the squad now. First of all, this is, in fact, I haven't got the full squad, but this was the team. This is the team as we were back in 1984, so 37 years ago. This is, well, this one, I hadn't got one of Richard then, but this was Sir Richard Clegg, or Richard Clegg as he is now, OBE. That's him in 1984, so that's the team manager. And then we got the team. Now, the reserve, well, the part of the squad then was Alan McAtee, but I haven't got his photo. I've only got the team photo, and I'll tell you about that now. But there's that's Kevin. We've all got a grim look. There's Kevin back then, 1984. Yeah, I took these pictures out of a newspaper cut and took the pictures and then printed off the photographs. Look at Tommy, look, he looks a bit determined, doesn't he? That's Tommy Pickering with his Steadfast Team England cap. So he was in the team. Quite a few of you know of this man, but you probably haven't seen him much. He's really got a grim look. That's Ian Heaps. He was already a world champion back in 76 in Poland, so, and he'd been part of the England team from then. Dennis. Don't think I ever remember seeing Dennis looking like this. Dennis White. This is Dennis White, another Barnsley, brilliant Barnsley angler from that era. These were all taken then, back in 1984. Oh, there's me. That's how I looked in 1984. Wouldn't it be lovely to be like that again, huh? I'd like to be like that with all my knowledge. That's what I'd like to be, that with all my knowledge. Not with all my money, because I ain't got no money, but you know, I would love that. So, and the other man in the squad was Alan McAtee. And he came from the northwest, Kevin, because it was a bit of a bloodworm job as well. So I'd sort of been and practiced a bit on bloodworm, not so much. So I mean, it was. I think Richard thought it was going to be a maggot job. So anyway, in practice, and we found exactly in practice what happened was that when the river flowed a little bit, yeah, it flowed quite reasonable. I don't know how they controlled it. I've got an idea there must have been a big lake at the top of the river, at the header part of the river, and they could release water whenever they wanted. So if they released at whatever pace they wanted, they could release this water into the river, ran down. So when they released it, it ran, well, I don't know what they used it for. Didn't run at any real pace, but perhaps supplied the town with water. I think then it ended up in another lake. So it was really one lake to another. And we, so it was, they could control the flow. When it ran, we could catch dace as soon as it stopped or it slowed up. They used to, in my memory, they used to run it fairly regular every day, sort of 11 till 2 o'clock, something like that, for 3 or 4 hours. But when you're fishing before then, or if it stopped, you couldn't catch any dace. Dace love a bit of movement, don't they? And they're probably used to moving. When it moved, they probably fed, and then when it was still, they didn't. And they didn't feed, and when it was still, you had to catch these perch. That was all there was. They'd feed little balls of bloodworm, catching perch, not far out, they weren't a long way out. And it was quite difficult. But when it flowed, it could flow reasonably hard, you know, and you did have to, you had to sort of, you fish in a pole because it wasn't very wide. So you can fish a pole at 9 metres, where it's hard to control a float and slow a float up at 9 metres on rod and line, isn't it? That's where a pole is really good. You imagine if you had to have a 9 metre, you can do it a little bit with bolognese, but you have to, a bolognese rod, but even then you're at an angle. So the pole is the best way because you have to, once a river flows, then you have to present that. And this happens a lot in my life and I've chatted about it to you before, but I learned all this style of fishing in my early days on the River Bann in the early 80s. That always flowed and you had to use a little bit of line to the float, but still sort of just letting it, just getting dead behind your float, not casting out beyond your pole tip, but dead in line and running it. And I've learned so much from them early years that held me in good stead. And And in practice, I did really well. So, but I still didn't think I'd get in the team. But I did. I was sort of, when it flowed, Kevin was very good as well. But when it flowed, I was catching as well, better than most. So, I don't know, did I think I was going to get in the team? No, not really. But there you are. I thought, oh well. And I had really good practice sessions. We were practicing, and that's hard work. 2 sessions a day, up early in the morning, get everything ready. 2 3-hour sessions. So we were doing a 3-hour session. Then you stop, pack all your gear up, move to another area, another 3-hour session. So you're fishing 6 hours plus moving, you know, setting up, untacking, setting up, untacking. And shattering, really. But Richard worked as hard because this was his first year as England team manager, and he wanted to make a good impression. He made a good impression on me, even as I said, I was so excited when he'd first called me, but I didn't really know him. It wasn't like I know him now. I was a bit of a stranger, a southerner, the only southerner in the team, if you look at that team. The only one that got in, but it was because of the pole. Only way is because of the pole. There was loads of other anglers that would have been better on Waggler than me and better on Slider, because pole was what I loved to do. So I was concentrating on that. So we came back home, and I sort of was thinking about what we had to do, how we had to prepare, but Richard didn't tell us the team. Normally he would let you know the team, but we were out there, then we were coming back home for about a week or 2 weeks, I think. We were back home. And during that time, he phoned me up and he said, Bob, he said, you're in the team. He said, I'm putting you in the team. I was so delighted. Felt sorry for Alan McAtee. He got dropped. So the anglers that I showed you were the team members. There was myself, the southerner. There was the 2 Barnsley anglers, Tommy Picker and Dennis White. I knew them fairly well, but we didn't fish the same circuit, so and they didn't fish in Ireland, so I didn't know them as much. Oh, I knew Tommy, he did fish a bit in Ireland. And then there was Kevin, who I knew very well, I fished with him in Ireland, and Ian Heaps, who I spent a lot of time with in Ireland as well, so I knew them. So I wasn't a real stranger to everybody, but I was so pleased to get in the team. And so we're back home, and then we got ready we went out there about 2 days before, just to get acclimatised before the big match. The match would be in September. That's usually the World Championship time, September in 1984. And we got out to the venue and just acclimatised ourselves, got settled into the hotel, we got our bait ready, prepared. It was going to be we knew it was going to be a bloodworm and joker job for the perch and for the dace and chub. It would be a maggot job. That was fairly simple. It was, as I say, it was only 11 metres wide, 2 metres deep. I've got a picture of the venue, and that says it was back then. I'm guessing that might have been my section, that one. I'm not sure. There's the venue. Not very good quality photograph, but I took that photograph, got it out of a newspaper cutting. I kept some newspaper cuttings, but there you are. And the spectators, we were all along one bank, and the spectators were all along the other bank. You know, sitting right opposite. They're not far away because it's 11 metres, and they were just standing. There was a big rope. Not far away, and they were all standing. Well, there weren't many then. We were in Switzerland, and nobody knew about the English team. Well, especially Bob Nudd, they didn't know about him, so there wouldn't have been anybody watching me. And the matches back then were still in. What happened was you fished one match of 3 hours, and I might be repeating this for some people, but I'm sorry, because sometimes some people, this might be the first video they're watching, but World Championships back in those times was fished over 1 day, 1 3-hour match, 5 anglers fishing, 1 in each of 5 sections. The draw then was, if the team drew peg 1, every team member would be on peg 1 in each section. It's a lot fairer now than it was then, but I don't know what I think we drew about peg 7 or 8. So every one of our anglers was on peg 8 in the section. And it was pegged back to front as well. A section was the downstream end of the fishery. And then and then it would work backwards. And usually when you're on rivers in this country, peg 1 will be the upstream end and then they'll work down. So peg 1 was the downstream end and everything was pegged backwards. So it's all relative, but that's how they pegged it back then. But as I say, and it's a 3-hour session. You get 5 minutes pre-baiting, so five minutes before the match starts. You can prepare. You get into you have a whistle that they blow. You get about an hour and a half to get your tackle into a box. It's boxed off with tape. You have 10 metres. We didn't have much more than 10 metres. It wasn't very long to fish. That was your zone, and then everyone had their own umpire, referee, sitting back behind, counting the number of fish, discounting if a fish went out of your zone, discounting if you foul hooked the fish, then it didn't count. So on a flowing river, then you got sort of slightly to the upstream end of your peg, if you could, so it gives you more of a run down. You still can't get right on the top end because you've got to slide your pole round a bit, and then you'll be going into the other anglers. You'd be encroaching on his area. So there is about a metre of no man's land. So you're given a little bit of a leeway. And yeah, and as I say, it's 3 hours session. And we're all acclimatised. Now, the team plan was we would fish, it seemed to be mainly perch, because if it ran, then, you know, you could catch a dace. And most of the times it was still anyway. So our main team plan, we got all these light rigs set up for perch, like 0.2 of a gram, 0.3 of a gram, half a gram, for fishing for the perch at about, not far out, 4 metres, 5 metres, just where it went into the slightly deeper. It was only 2 metres deep in the middle, and it was only 11 metres wide. So, yeah, you didn't really have much scope. You only had to try and draw fish if you could. And we went... we were sort of thinking about what we've got to do. I'd got all these... But what had happened was, overnight, I could hear the rain thumping against the roof of where we were staying. And got up in the morning and it was raining hard again, overcast, miserable, horrible day really, and rain. Hadn't stopped raining. And I didn't think nothing of it really, but got to the river and it was flying through. Absolutely flying through. And we got our team plan, all these light rigs up for perch. And luckily, I did have one biggish rig up, which I'd never fished before. It never flown that hard, but I'd got one. I got a 2.5 grammer, which I put up, you know, and I thought, well, I might need that. But Richard had said, the Swiss are going to stop it flowing. The match started at 12. He said, the river will stop at 12 o'clock. Gonna stop. And I was looking at it. It was about half 11. I was looking at the river. It was still flying through. And then 11:45, it was still flying through. And I was looking at it and thinking, oh, are you sure about that? And then 11:55 came and it was still flying through. Oh dear. Anyway, we stuck to our team plan. I mixed my ground bait up a bit and squeezed the balls a bit harder. And I thought, well, the team plan was to put some balls in on the bloodworm and joker line, softish balls. Of course, you couldn't do that because it was flying through. And then about 6 balls on the inside line, and then 3 or 4 balls on the 9 metre line, which wouldn't be used because nobody was catching many fish there. But it was still flying through. Luckily, I'd got this big... Richard came along to me, and this was then ready for... He said, it's going to stop. He said, it's going to stop at 12 o'clock. The Swiss have assured me it's going to stop at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, it was still hurtling through. Anyway, I fed as best I could. And
And I sort of looked and I see it was still flying through. So I knew it would be a waste of time fishing for perch. I just knew that. And I got this 2.5 gram float and I looked at the water, and I had that experience that I knew that wouldn't work. That 2.5 grammer on that river's flying through, that's not going to work. So I immediately this was before I even started to fish, and I weren't going to go for the perch because I knew I wouldn't catch them. I got my box out. We could use lead shot in those days, and I don't know what I got. I don't know how I knew how much to put on, but I knew it got to be a lot. So to this 2.5 gram float, I added 3 swan shot. Now there's you probably can't see the rig. There's roughly the rig that I used on the day. So 2.5 gram rig, and there's there with 3 swan shot below it, 2 number 4 droppers, a 20 hook, 010 mainline. I can't imagine I used to fish with such fine. Why would I put an 010 mainline on a 2.5 gram? Didn't know much then, did I, in them days? Miles too light. Should have been 012 at least, perhaps 014 mainline. Because it's only your hook length that matters, really. If you're pulling shots about, especially if you're clipping three number, like 3 swan shot on there. I don't know what a swan shot weighs, but that would have been another extra. I bet it'd been double the float would then, the 2.5 grammer would then become a 5 or 6 grammer, that's for sure. In no time, that's how you do it. If you want to slow the float down, and I've told you this before, but you might be the first time watching it. If you want to slow a float down, the only way to do it, we use flat floats now, but there was no flat floats, no cupping in kits, nothing like that. You had to throw everything. So as soon as it started to, if you got any flow, the more you overshot a float, the slower you can put it through the water. I could have put 10 swan shot on there. Well, I wouldn't have been able to control it then, but 3 swan shot, and it was really, I mean, I had a job to hold it. You imagine 3 swan shot, 2.5 grams overshot, so I'm hanging on to it because the water's flying through. I knew the dace would never in a million years take it at that pace. I just knew it. So these 3 swan shot were added, and out I goes, and about 9 metres. I think I might have put single maggot, double maggot. I was on a 20, so probably, no, an 18. I was on an 18, so probably a double maggot on because it's flowing and these dace were reasonable size. The dace were sort of 2-3 ounces. They weren't big fish, and there's the odd big chub as well about. And it was, so reasonable stamp fish to go for. And I knew from experience, when you're fishing a hard flowing river like that, you have to keep feeding. I knew I had to squeeze that ball as hard as I could, throw it a bit upstream, still within my zone, and you're allowed to be within your zone, and a little bit upstream, and I'll go down. The ground bait wasn't perfect. We could have done with some gravel, I know that. I mean, I just know so much more now. That's why I sort of laugh now, because I know if I'd been fishing there now, if I'd have been fishing there today, in the same conditions, I would have caught miles more fish than I caught on that day. Now, you wouldn't think that, would you? But with knowledge and knowing exactly what to do, I would have caught definitely more fish today than then, and with everything in the same conditions. If you could pole cup in, and the different poles we've got, and the fact you can add gravel to your ground bait, the stickier ground baits, lots of things I could have done. But the match starts, and so then I'm in with this three swan shot overshot it in, and just trying to creep it through. And what you have to do is just sort of try to, so the bristle, just the tip of the bristle of the float is just above the water. So you move your pole down with the flow, you're trying to hold your float back, and the flow is pushing it. So you let it, it wants to run a bit. You want to let it run. And sometimes you just get a little dig, just a little dig or something different on there like that, and boom. And about, I think 7 or 8 minutes, not long. Richard was there with me anyway, watching me. Boom. And it's lovely. Your first match, fishing for England, and you've got to fish on a rock hard venue when it's really difficult. And in comes this dace, and Richard's there, and you do, I don't always net my fish. In fact, if I think I can swing them and it's quicker, then that's what I do. And in fact, but Richard was there, so I had, he didn't tell me what to do, but I netted the fish because it might have been the only one in the match. So I netted. It was a lovely dace, about 3 ounces, which is what, about 90 grams. Unhooked it and into the net, and I hadn't seen any other fish caught. And out again, another little ball, running it down, and I was catching. Honestly, I was down again, just holding it. It was windy, it was cold, it was wet. Really tough conditions, but and the wind makes it harder because the wind's sort of blowing your pole about as well as you're trying to ease it. It was only at 9 metres, so it wasn't so difficult at holding the pole, but the wind still buffeting the pole backwards and forwards. And the first hour I got 20 days. Lovely, I was catching nicely, really. I mean, Richard, after that first one, he was gone. I never saw him anymore. And I carried on catching. Doing really well. You can tell sometimes when you're doing well, there's a few more spectators start to gather because there's not many fish being caught. Oh, who's up there catching all those fish? And at the end of the match, I think I caught about 20 an hour, so 20, difficult conditions. So that's a fish every 3 minutes, which isn't bad, is it? When it's tough, when you've got to put it through, run it. I'll tell you now, in this day now, I would have caught more, as I am now, with my knowledge, definitely, and with the equipment and that. Definitely would have done better. But I did brilliant, really. I was only beaten by a Frenchman, Hubert, I think his name, Hubert, I can't remember his surname. But he had a peg on a bridge and had a longer run than me. And the French, do you know what, they always know everything. They've got these big round-bodied floats set up. They knew it was going to run. I don't know how, but they all knew. So he had a proper, and he did beat me. So I was second in the section, but I weighed in a good weight. The Frenchman had 11 pound of dace, and I had 9 pounds something, 4.5 kilos, so nearly 10 pound of dace. 60 fish, 60 dace, 2-3 ounces. They were lovely, brilliant days fishing, really. Where's my fish? Oh, there's my net of fish. Let me show you that. There. Bobby's dace bag. Once again, I battered everybody round me. That was just the knowledge of knowing how to put a float through when it's flowing hard. If I'd have known it was going to flow like that, I'd have had the right float set up and I'd have probably done a bit better. And I'd have had my ground bait a bit better, obviously, but I didn't know that. Oh, there's Kevy. There's Kevin as well. I think he's just landing his first fish there. He didn't catch so many. How young we look back in those days. And there's a picture of me swinging in a dace, but you can't. I could see the picture on my inset is my shot. That's a colour picture back from then, but I'm just swinging in the dace, but you can't. I can see it when I put that picture up on my main computer. I can see it, but I can't see it on there. It's there somewhere, swinging in the dace. Because after Richard went anyway, I swung in every fish I could. It was not a problem. So I come second in my section, which was brilliant, really. Wow, brilliant. It was good. It was good. I didn't win my section, but I was second. And back in those days, if you were in the top 4 in your section, you fished the individual match the next day, which I did, and that was a disaster because hardly anybody caught. Only 4 people caught. So let's tell you what actually happened. There was so Kevin drew the bottom section, A section. That was the furthest one downstream. And he had a tough match, but he caught a few fish and he had 770 grams. He was 5th in his section with that. Tommy drew a really tough bit. And I don't know what his weight was. Wasn't very much, but he was 11th in his section. That was our worst result. Ian Heaps was in C section, next one up, and he had 1 kilo 300. And fifth in his section with that. So we got 2 5ths and 11th. Then you come to me in D section. I had 4 220 and was second in my section. And then Dennis did brilliant. He was in the upstream. It was a really shallow, tough section. I didn't want that section because every time we'd been up there, it had been a bit hard. Although it flowed, there didn't seem to be as many fish up that end. And he weighed 880 grams and was 5th in his section. So in all, we had, 7.5 kilos, our total team weight, 28 points. But Luxembourg tied with us on points. They had 28 as well. So our first attempt at a World Championship with Richard Clegg, we were equal first, but we just lost out on weight because the Luxembourg team, they drew peg 1. So they had end pegs. 3 of their pegs, they had completely sort of 50, 60, 70 metres downstream of them. So they could draw more fish. But they still won it, and they won it on weight. And probably if we'd have been on that peg, yeah, we would have won it. But we did do well, really, because we were in the middle. Each of us was in the middle of our sections. It was the first year under Richard, so we thought we had our team tactics right, but it wasn't. It was the experience of the anglers that got us through, because all that we did in practice, none of it counted. So it was just the pure ability of that team that got us through to equal points with Luxembourg. The French, who knew, I think they come about 5th or 6th, but they knew what was going to happen. Belgium were 3rd then with 40 points. So it was, so we'd won. We came back from. Let me just see if I've got any more pictures for you. No, I think that's a lot of the pictures. You've seen the venue. So that was fabulous. England had won. Got silver, which it was like a win on a terrible, terrible conditions. None of us could fish to a team plan because we hadn't experienced that before. It was just the individual anglers on their own. Tommy, Dennis, Ian, Kevin and myself that adjusted to the conditions on that day, that river that was flying through, to sort of overshot floats, run them through really, really steadily. And as I say, that was where I'd learnt this from the band. So really the river band, I owe a lot to that. It was, really was a memorable match. My first match, a southerner in the England team. And that really sort of kept me in there it kept me in there for 20 years. I'm not going to go for every one of the 20 years. I'll probably do, I don't know, 2 more of these, and hopefully we'll be out of lockdown and fishing matches and whatever we normally do. So thanks everybody for watching. This is the 7th program in the series, Bob's Golden Memories, the River Thiel in Yverdon, Switzerland, 1984. Where my first time being picked to fish for England, I was 2nd in the section. Got more than half of the England weight, I think. I had, 4 kilo odd, and the whole team only weighed 7. So even back in those days, I was drawing flyers, wasn't I? Well, we never draw them. Richard always draws the pegs. It's always a team manager that draws your pegs. You just get handed your number. You don't get any chance to pick it. So that's why I put my winning ways down to Richard Clegg, that's all. So thank you for watching the 7th program in the series. Hope you enjoyed it, and come back again for the 8th in the series, whichever one that's going to be, whatever I think to do. It's great. Thanks very much for watching. See you again next time.